Do you know that you can go into a shop here and purchase a rifle or a revolver? It's perfectly legal. These people encourage... Stop it!
A writer invents a time machine, which is then stolen by a serial killer who heads to the future to kill the writer's new girlfriend. Look, this happens all the time. H.G. Wells goes after Jack the Ripper and falls in love, though not with Jack the Ripper. That ship has sailed.
That man is crazy. I can see it in his face.
If you're lost, you can look, and you will find me. Time after time.
I'm obliged to take you back to face the consequences of your acts.
Time After Time is a 1979 film from director Nick Meyer that's part thriller, part romance, part science fiction.
My name is H.G. Wells.
In 1893 in London, women are being murdered by the serial killer known as Jack the Ripper. Meanwhile, Herbert George Wells, known as H.G. to both his friends and creditors, is a well-known writer and futurist, somebody interested in things like free love and utopia. He's holding a get-together frequented by a group of his closest and most harumphing friends, including the surgeon, John Leslie Stevenson, who sounds suspiciously like the Ripper. Herbert announces his plans to go travelling.
Blast you, Wells, that's my coffee!
They're interrupted by the police looking for the Ripper after his latest killing, and lo and behold, both Stevenson and the time machine are gone. Now, the script for this movie has built in several safeguards to avoid falling into plot holes with any potential logical flaws that have been foreseen, and a loophole has been signposted. The time machine has a key that means it will work, but the machine will return on its own. There's also another sparkly thingamy that is in no way telling you how the plot will be resolved at this early stage. Now, you can't see me, but I am winking. Wells surmises that Stevenson is the Ripper and follows him, where after a journey through time, he's apparently 8 hours off London time. Oh, and he's now in San Francisco in 1979.
Get away from that exhibit. Where do you think you are? Disneyland?
Wells thought he'd find utopia in the future. Instead, he's landed in America in the 20th century. Time travel stories without somebody being hopelessly and comedically out of touch would be very dull, so Wells wanders around San Francisco hopelessly and comedically out of touch. He's of course brilliant and surmises that Stevenson would have to find a bank to change some money, and he will eventually track down the particular bank that the villain had frequented, where Wells meets the bank clerk, Amy. She's kinda taken with him almost off the bat, and offers to show Wells the city's highlights. Note, she at no time takes him to Fisherman's Wharf for clam chowder, which, depending on your history with clam chowder, is either a bad move or a really sensible one. Amy and Wells are clearly falling for each other, where she's an oversharer, but he's trying very hard not to admit that his most recent change of underwear was 86 years ago. Coincidentally enough, a serial killer has been hard at work in San Francisco, meaning Stevenson has continued to pursue his hobby. Spoilers, it's not model trains. Wells does manage to track down Stevenson, where he's right at home in the 20th century.
90 years ago, I was a freak. Today, I'm an amateur.
Stevenson attacks Wells and grabs the key.
I'm going to tell you the truth.
Wells tries to explain to Amy the thing about the underwear, but it's time travel, I swear.
You don't believe me?
Christ, Herbert, what do you think?
He shows her the time machine at the H.G. Wells exhibit that he arrived at,
Suppose we just go forward to this Saturday.
where she happens to spy a newspaper that proves A, her new boyfriend is not a liar, and B, that she's going to be found dead. The best laid plans of mice and men and time travelers mean everything Wells and Amy do to avoid her death goes spectacularly bad. Wells is arrested on suspicion of being the Ripper, and Stevenson shows up at Amy's apartment. The cops arrive finding the Ripper's handiwork. Now that was not meant to be taken so literally. For a film that has gone to spectacular lengths to avoid plot conveniences, we have a massive plot convenience. It wasn't Amy that had been found dead, but her friend from work who'd been invited over for dinner. But by this stage, Amy's being held by the Ripper, and after a chase, one of those bits of dialogue from early in the film proves to stop Stevenson dead. Herbert intends to return to his time alone, but relents and takes Amy with him, where he will marry her, and he'll write many books.
Pomfrits? Fries are pomfrits?
Time After Time is a very good film, one that has enough charm and cleverness to entertain you, even if it's not necessarily a top-tier, iconic or influential film. It's a very likeable film with a fantastic premise that manages to use the setup to ratchet up the stakes for Herbert. The burgeoning relationship between Amy and Herbert is great to watch.
We keep imagining that time is our enemy, but it's not.
Nick Meyer had written a successful 1974 novel, The 7% Solution, about Sherlock Holmes being treated by Sigmund Freud. 2 years later, it was turned into a feature film with Meyer writing the screenplay. But, like the guy applying for a job holding the stop sign at Roadworks, he wanted to direct. Writer Carl Alexander had sent Meyer a part of a manuscript looking for feedback, and instead Meyer optioned the story for use in his directorial debut. Both the film and novel would follow a similar plot, but would diverge in some areas. Meyer simply wanted the film to be his idea of that basic premise, which, like his Holmes novel, was about two historical figures whose paths crossed.
One day I shall win.
Yes, when you learn how I think.
Nicholas Meyer, as a first-time director, was upfront and told his crew that he would listen to advice on how to mount scenes or script issues, on the understanding that he would make the final call. It is very much his film, and he will own whatever small flaws exist in the framing and the story. And it's, of course, not perfect, but for a first-time director working on a modestly budgeted film, it ended up as a pretty good film.
You still maintain this is all poppycock?
That wasn't exactly the word I had in mind.
One thing Meyer will now admit to was that the script will do several things early on that could be missed or forgotten by the casual viewer. The most obvious is when Amy wasn't killed but it was her co-worker. I mean, that is all signposted, but it ends up as being the least satisfying part of the film, where it seems like a bit of a cheap cheat and stands out only because the rest of the film deals with potential problems in a more refined way.
My name is Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, I see.
There's also the explanation of how a machine that only moves in time can travel across the Atlantic to the US, and then finally, we make sure that we know how Wells can drive a car late in the film.
Damn straight.
The script takes a lot of pain to explain how Stevenson can take the time machine and have it return back to 1893 for Wells to use, and also setting up a way for Stevenson to be dispatched with the minimum of fuss. Without the glowy stick thing, the time machine will send its traveller through time without the machine, which will also end up killing them. It's such a convoluted way to kill off the villain, but having Wells stand over the corpse of Stevenson with a bloodied axe was not what this film was about. At several times in the movie, Wells shows an aversion to violence, and his wish is to bring Stevenson to justice without resorting to force.
Oh, we're obviously killing much more efficiently, but we're still killing.
However, he at no point has any idea of how he's going to achieve any of this. I mean, we poo-pooed the idea of the bloodied axe embedded in the villain's head. You know, it's a thought, you know, it makes you think. You know, it's a thought, it makes you think.
It's catching, isn't it? Violence.
Malcolm McDowell was often hired to play villainous types or anti-heroes, and here he's playing an actual hero, whose only major vice is that he's initially too timid to try out his time machine, groping for any excuse to put off giving it a test drive. You know, lots of pre-existing commitments like a doctor's appointment to have some leeches removed, or he's attending a public demonstration of the first attempted three-quarter fade.
Well, if you rotate to the west, you gain yesterdays. To the east, you accumulate tomorrows.
McDowell had starred in the film Caligula and had wanted something that wasn't either A, very violent and gory, or B, being turned into a porno. And when he'd read Meyer's script, he was hooked, since the director was also not looking to make a gory film or a porno. In researching his role, McDowell listened to recordings of the real H.G. Wells, and rather than the venerated writer having an authoritative tone, he had a South London accent that also sounded like somebody had huffed all of the helium from every balloon at a wedding reception. So, screw realism, McDowell would instead play the character as people would expect a Victorian gentleman to sound, or at least how one would sound in one's head, particularly if one was American, wouldn't one? Though, thinking about it now, how would the film be if McDowell had gone for a realistic take on Wells's voice?
So far, I counted 30 geezers and 3 freezers and 20 girls in the milk fridge.
This was a big break for McDowell, as it was his first big American feature film lead role.
Give me a Big Mac, fries, and tea to go, please.
Mick Jagger had been considered for the role of Stevenson, but that would have been funny since he apparently sounds more like the real Wells than McDowell does. But of course it's not funny if you've ever seen Mick Jagger acting.
And a bigger crock of shit I never heard.
David Warner had been a star on the British stage and had worked on movies and television for a long time, though he'd begin appearing in more and more genre productions in the 80s. Time Bandits, Trons, and practically every fantasy or science fiction television show you could name. Stevenson is a villain and evil, but he does not come across as a cartoon villain. Warner was pitch perfect, apart from the fact that he'd at one point broken both ankles and couldn't run in a scene where he's being chased on foot by Wells.
If you don't take me into your arms this very minute, I'll scream.
This was Mary Steenburgen's second film, and of the three leads, she'd probably have the highest profile career in American productions. Amy always lets you know what she's thinking, and is somebody who probably shouldn't play poker, but is somebody you really want to play poker with. Mary Steenburgen would of course star in another time travel movie where she fell in love with a time traveller, this time one from the future. Now, I'm not saying this development has any influence on my own work researching time travel. I mean, we just can't get the chronophonic neutral warp to stay warped long enough to mitigate the temporal drift. Never mind. Steenburgen and McDowell work so well together, partly because they're both very good actors, but not all of it is acting, since they became a couple during the film's production, eventually having 2 children together and staying together for a decade. The film was shot on location in San Francisco and at the Burbank Studios, back when Warner Brothers shared the facility with Columbia.
Seems easier to watch the TV, even though that's mainly crap.
Warner Brothers at the time had been using the flatter, modern version of the company logo, and Nick Meyer insisted they use the famous Shields logo that hadn't been used in years, since the film was, in many ways, a throwback to an earlier era of filmmaking. Warner Brothers would later revert to versions of the Shield, but then years later, whenever a director on a Warner's film wanted to imply the 1970s, they'd use that squarer 70s logo. Maybe I should just use the Stam Fine logo from the 70s much more often. As it's a movie needing a time machine, the props department built a design that looked much like what you'd expect a Victorian-era time machine to look like, but with Victorian values in mind. Wells's designs were well screwed together by an army of workhouse artisans and crafts children.
You're very perceptive.
The prop itself wasn't particularly robust during filming, but it does have a good screen presence. Some of the effects used for the time travel sequences look absolutely great, where they have their own look and feel separate from George Pal's 1960 film. And then there are other parts that look less good, mainly for the time machine in operation, which are just about adequate. They're sparkly, and because it's a film from 1979, they loved using the star filter. Miklos Rocha gave the film a very dramatic old-school score at a time when filmmakers were starting to demand more and more traditional big Hollywood-style dramatic scores. It suits the film well, where it's romantic and dramatic all in one fell swoop, much like celebrating Valentine's Day by you both going skydiving.
Oh, what are you babbling about, Wells?
Time After Time was released in September of 1979 and did solid business, but it didn't lead to studios knocking down Meyer's door to finance his passion project. I do not know why vandalism has to be involved. In a depressed funk, he'd eventually and reluctantly take a meeting that would change his life, where he would write and direct Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, a film that would link his name to the franchise, that at various points would also throw work to David Warner and Malcolm McDowell.
To the Hyatt.
The title would inspire Cyndi Lauper to write one of her most popular songs after seeing the listing in TV Guide. She had wanted to change the song title since the song had nothing to do with the film, but the title stuck. Later on, a short-lived television series couldn't make up its mind whether it was based on a version of Carl Alexander's book, Lauper's song, or Meyer's film.
Is that what they're wearing in London?
It was when I left.
Time After Time took an interesting premise, a first-time director, 3 perfectly cast actors, and gave us a really, really, really good film.
Let's go.
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
It's only a movie.